I have a custom of reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Every couple of years I'll work through, and I was so struck on one of my readings about the role of creativity and being made in the image of God. What does that mean? And when I started looking at creativity in the biblical sense, I realized that all humans were made. If you have a brain, you are made to create. And we are called into God's story to be a partner.
I think what's beautiful about Gainesville is that God is doing things in Gainesville that would seemingly be impossible. God calls people to this place. And it's not just one person, it's not just several people. The more you talk to people, the more you realize there must be something going on in this town.
I will start with saying my heart is with Gainesville now. That was not always the case. My father was recruited to come to the University of Florida in 1960 for the brand new medical school that had just opened, and he was called to be the renal specialist and open the division of renal medicine, which is kidney medicine. And my father was the lead inventor of the team that invented Gatorade in 1965. You wouldn't think suffering from me would be going back to the Gatorade story. But for me, that was a story all of my siblings and I wanted to avoid, never speak to, never talk about, hide the story because it was a painful story. The Gatorade story was nothing more than a kidney research project because they were friends, the students and my dad, with an assistant football coach who was a full-time security guard at Shands Research Hospital, where my father worked. So over coffee one day, the security guard said, I had 15 players come into the infirmary yesterday from heat exhaustion. And it started a whole conversation of why don't football players pee during a game? It all started with a question. Why don't football players pee? And my dad immediately understood what he could do to help the Gators, because he was studying how does sodium move through the body, and the kidney controls sodium and water levels. And he thought they're losing everything through sweat. I need to replace what they're losing, and I know just how to do it. So my dad got 10 freshman players to be the guinea pigs and drew their blood, took their temperature, collected sweat in a glove, took it back to the laboratory, analyzed it, saw what was happening to their blood serum, and knew this is what I have to do to replace it. 2 sodium molecules, 1 glucose will bring in 300 molecules of water, rehydrating the patient. With the invention of Gatorade, it was at a time before the nation understood the role of an inventor at a university. There was really no clear pathway to commercialization. So it ended up in a very bitter lawsuit with the University of Florida, my father's employer, and that was a super scary time. The federal government is suing my father, the university is suing my father, they cut off the funds. We had no funds at that time. And then I was so angry about my father is the most wonderful human being, maybe with the exception of my mom. But I mean, they were both such an amazing couple. How can they do this to him? And I was angry. And when people asked, would you go to University of Florida? It was like, I will never go to University of Florida. In fact, as soon as I'm 18, I'm leaving Gainesville, never to return.
So my relationship to Gainesville, boy, that's a loaded question. So I grew up here. I mean, this is home. And so during my formative years, I never thought I was coming back to Gainesville. It was like, like most of my friends, we would go to college, find a job, move away, and never come back, or maybe we come back to retire. When I left Gainesville the first time, I got to experience after graduation, I went to Florida A&M, I graduated, I moved to California. So California was the first time that I realized that the world was not just black and white. So post grad school, post-business school, I moved to Atlanta, and I absolutely loved Atlanta, and I loved being a consultant. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And one day, I was in a leadership program. It was for high-performing minorities. And I remember it was 6 months. We got 6 months of executive training. And then at the end of that experience, I'm sitting in the chair, and I heard the Lord just as clear as you and I are talking. He said, everything that you need from here, you now have. And so in 2007, my wife and I packed up from Atlanta. We moved to Gainesville. She was 6 months pregnant with our second child. Our oldest was 3, and our third was yet unborn. So we moved to Gainesville. I'm really excited. I got this idea about mirror image. It's not fully developed into anything that it is today, but I know that my assignment is to help people see themselves the way that God created them to be. So I am like, yes, let's go. I know that Gainesville is the place we're supposed to be, and we moved here, and it was the worst 3 years of our lives. It was the absolute worst. And I remember saying to the Lord, you know, God, if it's this hard to do what you've called me to do, I'm not cut out for it. So after 3 years, we packed our stuff back up and we moved back to Atlanta.